last 3 decades, I've had the opportunity to work with high-level entrepreneurs, national media best-selling authors, major brands, and leaders across publishing, publicity, and television. And today's guest is someone who has genuinely helped shape the modern publishing conversation, David Hancock. He is the founder of Morgan James Publishing, a Wall Street Journal best-selling author, and one of the most respected authorities in the publishing industry today. So, what I appreciate about David is that he doesn't just help people publish books, he helps people build credibility, authority, and meaningful impact through their message. And in a world where a lot of people are chasing visibility, David understands how to build lasting influence. And for authors, speakers, and coaches and thought leaders, that distinction matters more than ever. I'm excited for this conversation because I know we're going to give people real insight into publishing, positioning, and what actually creates long-term credibility. David Hancock, he's become one of the most respected names in modern publishing, helping thousands and meaningful impact in their books. David, thank you so much for being here.
Starley, what a privilege. It's so fun to see you again and be here with you today. I can't wait to hear what I have to say.
I know. I can't wait for you to share. So I mean, it's no secret that I talk about you as a mentor. So, and a lot of people don't realize someone in my position gets to not only be around people like you, but I get to see what you guys are like behind the scenes. And when you see what people are like behind the scenes and they have the same heart back there as they do that they project in person, it's such a treat because someone like yourself truly is the real deal.
I'm so grateful. I appreciate that. I feel the same way because we get a chance to meet some amazing people and we get to read their stuff and hear about their passion and their influence, long before the public does. So yeah, I feel it, but thank you for that.
Yeah, well, it's my goal to at least embarrass you one time on this, if not more. So now, even though I know a lot about your backstory and it's been very inspiring for me, I would appreciate if you'd share a little bit about what originally made you want to change the traditional publishing model and to create something that's different, this cool hybrid that we're talking about with Morgan James Publishing. And then we're going to get into dun dun dun
Oh my
a
gosh.
book reveal. All
Uh,
right. So tell me a little bit about that because I think it's a great setup before we get into what's in the box.
Oh my goodness, Starley. It's one of my favorite stories to tell. Now, how do I do it in a short period of time? So I'll do my best. So I was born back in 19, no, I won't go back that far. Because it's all connected. It really is, I promise.
I know, I
Uh,
know.
Short version, I was a banker back in the 90s. Fat, dumb, and happy. Never imagined doing anything else. And they were paying me stupid money for a college dropout. I had just found my niche and I was doing really, really well. But as a banker, sounds like I might have been a typical W-2 employee, which I really was, but I was 100% commission. So if I didn't hustle, I didn't make any money. So I treated my business as if it were my own entrepreneurial venture. And that was part of my early success. But I was successful, but I didn't necessarily know why. In fact, it really became obvious one day when my bosses came to me and said, "Hey, David, you're doing wonderful." I'm like, "Hey, thanks. I know, right?" They said, "Why don't you hire a bunch of people and teach them to do what you do, and we'll all make more money and serve more people." I'm like, I don't even know why I'm successful. I don't know if I can do that. But I thought, yeah, what a great opportunity. So, we guerrilla marketers, we say yes to things, because there's not a reason to say no. But then I had to scramble. I had to figure out what was it that was making me successful. I started to study really for the first time for me, under all the best gurus in sales and marketing and industry specific stuff and non-industry stuff. It was just, my path of, hey, trying to figure out what was it that was making me successful. And I studied under Zig Ziglar, Tom Hopkins, Bill Backrack, Todd Duncan, John Maxwell, you name them. And I went to their seminars, I bought their books, I bought their courses, I implemented, because if you don't implement, nothing happens, right?
Yeah.
And it was all wonderful. I mean, I fine-tuned some processes. I hired, assistant. I worked a little bit less. I earned a little bit more money, but nothing really gave me that feeling like, oh, this is me. I just made me better, if you will. But I was still searching. But one day I came to work because, as I started to hire people and as my staff and colleagues were watching me, everybody knew what I was trying to do. And one day I came to work and a copy of this book was on my desk, Guerrilla Marketing. Like this is the first edition. And I'm like, where did this come from? And to this day, nobody has ever told me they left it. But Guerrilla Marketing by Jay Levinson was basically the cornerstone that really helped me realize, oh my gosh, I was a guerrilla and didn't know it. I had never heard of guerrilla marketing. It wasn't in the library when I was looking for stuff like that because we had no Google back then. It wasn't in the Barnes and Noble for whatever reason. It's sold out or whatever. But he had sold 15 million copies before I discovered it. And I immersed myself in the guerrilla marketing and realized I was a guerrilla and didn't know it. I was leveraging my time, my energy, my imagination, serving others, helping others realize their goals, developing, values-based relationship and serving. And it was called guerrilla marketing. And I didn't waste money while doing it too. That's a big part of guerrilla marketing as well. You don't want to waste money or time. So in the book, I think it was like the next edition was called Guerrilla Marketing for the 90s or something. And I had that copy here somewhere too. He said something I hadn't seen but like one other book in all the books I had read. He said, "Hey, if you have questions, email me." So I emailed him, jview@aol.com. And I mean, he's not going to respond, but he did. It took about 2 weeks, but he did. And we ended up becoming pen pals. And then I ended up hiring him as a coach, mentor, really. And oh my gosh, he changed my life. He walked me through, what guerrilla marketing was, what I was doing well, what I could lean into more. But he didn't necessarily teach me anything that I hadn't already discovered on my own. So that was good. But his accountability, his stories, just that relationship was so powerful. But he did lean into one weapon. And it's funny, I don't even remember what the number of the weapons was because in guerrilla marketing, there's, now 300 weapons that you should do, for marketing your business or whatnot. And he said, "David, do you need to write a book?" And this is the short version. He said, basically, if you wanted to charge more and negotiate less, who doesn't? He says, if you want to charge more and negotiate less, you've got to keep doing what you're doing because it's working. You're adding value. You're creating a name for yourself, yada, yada, yada. And I'm like, yeah, sign me up for that. And then he also added, hey, if you wanted to have those people that would never give you the time of day, those people that you wished you could do business with. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I was a top producer, but there still were, in my mortgage banking industry, celebrity real estate agents that I wasn't getting all their business, or CPAs or lawyers who knew where all the big money was. I wasn't getting all their business. So I like, yeah, I like that too. And he says same thing about media. If you wanted the media to start calling you when things happened in your space, and in the 90s in the mortgage business, there was always something happening. So I'm like, yeah, I didn't know if I could really be a good bobblehead on TV, but I'll try. Um, but when he said that I needed to write a book, it was both exciting, terrifying, and crushing at the same time. Because like, who am I to write a book? What do I have to say? I mean, I reminded Jay, because by this point we'd become good friends as well. I'm like, I dropped out of college. I barely passed English. I mean, I barely passed high school. I was too busy chasing soccer balls and my wife of over 36 years. So that's good. But he was very loving, very gracious, Starley. He helped me realize that I was doing something unique. I had created some sort of pattern, and he helped me realize I could write a book. And I ended up writing a book. Didn't realize that was a hard thing to do. I know, right? And I ended up getting it published. Didn't realize that was a hard thing to do either. And sure enough, within 8 months, everything that Jay said came to fruition. I doubled my income. I didn't raise my fees. I didn't have to. People stopped negotiating with me because I was the authority. And then the media started calling me on a regular basis. And, I certainly happy to do that. And then the funniest part was those people, just as Jay said, those people started coming out of the woodwork. So celebrity agents, those CPAs and law firms, they were lining up to give me their business. And I swallowed my pride and took their money, of course. But it worked. It really worked. I became very passionate about, wow, the power of the book. But with every decision we make as humans, there's pros and cons. And this is where some of that early inklings of something's not necessarily right for entrepreneurs in publishing. Basically publishing is you sell them your intellectual property. They do with it as they please. They make all the decisions without you, make decisions that benefit them, and then they yell at you for not selling enough books. I mean, that's kind of the gist. But it is exactly right. I had no relationship with the publisher. They made all the decisions that were kind of not even, that I had no involvement in, that didn't make any sense. And the book was ugly. And they added 3 chapters to the book. I didn't know it till I got my copies in the mail. It was just miserable. And then having to pay retail for author copies because they said I was buying too many copies at a discount. So they cut me off. And then having to get my PowerPoints approved every time I went out on the speaking circuit because the book provided me an opportunity to go out on speaking. And it was just so frustrating.
Yeah.
But it was working. And then one day they came to me and say, hey, it's time for book 2. I'm like, not with you. But they gave me a 3-book deal, which I was probably excited about until I wasn't. So I go to Jay and I'm like, I don't want to do it with them. And like, he said, you got to. And I'm like, not unless you write it with me. I kind of blurted out. And he said, okay. So my second and third books were co-authored in the Guerrilla Marketing series. But even with Jay, as my co-author who had sold 15 million books and I had sold thousands, we still struggled with every aspect of publishing. Now, don't get me wrong, we had tremendous credibility, tremendous distribution, and lots of opportunity. It was wonderful. But that lack of relationship, that difficulty was just very frustrating. But as you can imagine, I became very passionate about the power of that book, for an entrepreneur like me. And if you got stuck in an elevator, you heard all about it. But I had made lots of friends on the speaking circuit, and I just became very passionate. And I had met enough authors to realize that there were many like me who were entrepreneurs who were struggling with that
Yep.
different dynamic than we were hoping for, with the traditional house. But after my three-book deal, I'm like, what do I need to publish it for? I'm a best-selling author. Careful. So I go and I self-published three books after that, thinking, they're going to be mine. And I loved them. Covers were exactly what I wanted. The content was mine. I'd have to ask permission for anything, and I printed a bunch of books and I was really excited about them. But there's pros and cons with that decision too. Now, don't get me wrong. Self-publishing is absolutely better than doing nothing. You just got to do it well, write a good quality book and market it as you should. But for me, I was used to being in bookstores, and even today, self-publishing is very challenging, if at all, to be able to get into bookstores. It certainly wasn't that way in the early 2000s when I started to self-publish. And media wouldn't talk to me about my self-published books, even though they had become friends. And like, why can't you talk to me about my new books? And like, well, our producers require that we vet every author who comes in to talk to us, and we don't have time. We don't have the resources, so we allow publishers, or they rely on publishers to do their vetting for them. It's like, well, I guess that makes sense. And then I overestimated how many books I could sell without those attributes, and I filled my garage with the books. And this is where the humility comes in. I ended up throwing away more books because the termites ate them faster than I could sell them.
Oh,
And I had pushed my bride's car, well, mine too, but our car is out of the garage to fill it up with books and then throwing them away. Waste of money, waste of time. It was not fun. And it was very humbling. So I go to Jay again. At this point, he stopped charging me when we started co-authoring, and we're still best buds at this point. He was my he's just an amazing individual. So I go to him and like crying and whining again. Oh, somebody's got to fix publishing. It's broken. They don't get us, thing. And I'm like whining like a little 5-year-old. It was so much fun. And he was very smart, very wise mentor. He said, why don't you put together an outline for what you think a great relationship could look like, should look like between an entrepreneurially minded author like us,
right.
and a publisher. And he kind of alluded to me, he's a very smart man. He kind of alluded to me that he could take it to Houghton Mifflin, who was the original publisher of
Okay.
Guerrilla Marketing. And he says, I'm still good friends with them. They're still got, a couple more editions coming out, of Guerrilla Marketing. I bet I can probably convince him to set up an imprint for We Entrepreneurs. And I'm like, yes, challenge accepted. So I pour my heart and soul into this outline where the authors retain control of their intellectual property, where you make decisions together with the publisher and maybe make some decisions that benefit the author too. And then one of the biggest holes, right? So one of the biggest holes was the marketing side, because the biggest conversation I ever had with my publisher was I wasn't selling enough books. Now I sold 40,000 copies of my second book to the bank I worked for through retail. That was a good deal, right? Never was enough, but they don't give us any resources on how to sell books. Now, I had a Jay Levison in my court, so that's how I ended up selling so many books. But most people don't know how to sell books. We know our other stuff. So let's figure out how we can teach them, how to sell books. But also layered in a lot of guerrilla marketing because at this point I've become a master guerrilla marketer. I put a lot of zig in there, serving others, a lot of values based, and all the stuff I learned from the gurus. And I present it to Jay like, here you go, yay! Now we'll have a place to publish. And he received it, read it, loved it, but did not take it to Houghton Mifflin. He said what you would imagine a great mentor should say. He said, basically, if you want it done right, now go do it. So that was 2002. And went and got my bride's involvement, of course, because I want to stay married. And we decided that we could. We had it really. We think we have a good idea. In fact, I tease. I tell people we had a really good idea, and my regular good looks, and my regular good looks was questionable. So let's lean in on the really good idea. So we ended up naming it after our two kids, Morgan and James. Sounds like a real company, but it means something to us. And just launched with breaking every rule, doing it the way that we think it should be done. And then we ended up learning what rules we shouldn't break and in the relationships we needed to forge, but just set out with Morgan James and just had immediate success. I tell people, I had very little to offer except that big idea, but I had a lot of God's favor and then a whole bunch of friends who just gave us a chance. And we ended up earning our credibility. We earned our distribution. By 2006, we had our first four New York Times bestsellers. We rang the opening bell at NASDAQ in 2008. We had our first two number one New York Times bestsellers by 2011, and just kind of grew and developed relationships and broke the mold. And I tell you what, fast forward almost 25 years later, we have changed the industry, but we've done it, one amazing author at a time, and been very blessed. That was a short version, Starley, but that's kind of well, I guess I should ask, what was the question again?
David, I've heard you on stage, and I knew what I was getting into when I asked this question, and I'm glad because there is no way I can tell the story about how your company, how you started, what was your origin story like you can. And people ask me all the time when I introduce you, and then I say the word hybrid book publishing, then they want me to break it down like you would. And so
Yeah,
I usually have
yeah.
my David Cliff Notes that were, I understand it because I get it. And then you've been so gracious to involve me in different events before, and so I get to see how it really works behind the scenes. However, nobody can tell the story and explain better than the founder, and especially like what's your driving mission, behind it. And so David, I just think that those of us who have been through struggles first of the things that we teach are some of the best experts out there. And with this huge AI revolution and technology, rush that's going on, that's one of the things that a lot of the veteran experts should be excited about because they can double down on their, 10 or 20 or 30 plus years of
Yeah,
experience. Because while the market gets really noisy and really crowded, the experts, such as yourself, people like ourselves who've been around for a few decades, we really, being in the trenches helps to uh, come up with lots of solutions that you would have never thought existed that
right.
cater to individual people's challenges, right? And even more so, where, you could say something like, I don't know, maybe I'll write a book with more than one solution. So, as you know, we have we talk about our mentors and their amazing messages and things that we think are going to help our community. On my television appearances, we've got a new podcast show. We have a retreat. And so I asked you, oh, David, please, I would really love to share this with our community for our retreat. Can you, help us out with our gift bag for our media members and for our dun, 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 first opening the box, and for our attendees gift bag. And
I'm so
so
excited.
you have graciously sent me this. I have not gotten to look in here yet. This meeting today is about who you are, your backstory, and the publishing. And then it's just a sneak preview on the book because after I read this book, I'm going to ask you back. I'm putting you on the spot right now. I'm going to ask you back so I can talk to you about some of the real things in this book. Okay, now I'm showing it, but I've got to look because I haven't gotten to look. So I shared with you behind the scenes what I am guilty of and what I'm proud of in terms of when I first look at somebody's book and a book cover, whether I'm seeing it digitally online and I'm shopping or if I'm seeing it in a bookstore. Now, I'm a very visual person, right? Three
Yeah,
decades of television and art directing. So when I first look at this particular book, some of the things that stand out for me the most is that it looks very like rich. And when I mean rich, I mean rich in colors and texture. And it gives me a very classy feeling. And the print is very easy for me to read. Now, as a veteran, those probably sound like such remedial things for someone for like me to say. But these are my screening out things. If I am turned off by the book cover, somebody's amazingly hard, how many months that they work on their book. If
right.
I can't give a simple, I like the look, it's easy for me to read what it is in a couple of seconds, and it's not just because I've been a national television producer where decisions have to be made that quick. It's because that's how I read books. So I'm going to ask you some questions about, don't want to give everything away till the next interview, but I did want to just admit to people that, yeah, if the cover in the first few seconds doesn't grab me, I very often will move on. I mean, if
Yeah.
you're my client and you've hired me to help you, of course I'm going to read cover to cover. But I've had people recommend like thousands of books to me saying, "Oh, hey, check this, check that out." And then I'm like, "It just doesn't seem like it's for me." And you think, "Wow, really? You would do
First
that?"
impressions matter. Yeah.
I'm not trying to sound mean, but sometimes I'll keep an 80 to 100-hour week, and sometimes I'm just making decisions really quickly.
Yeah.
So, and now here's the other thing. I have this book in my hand and it has a very buttery feel. And I know that, book covers can feel all different, and that's okay if it's, you got different kinds of book covers, but I really this is a book that feels good when you're holding it. And then also look right here, this mentor name. I recognize the author. Obviously, that's a big plus. But look what we got here. Street cred right under your name. Wall Street Journal and USA Today best-selling author.
That's right.
It doesn't hurt to have that street cred. And I immediately know what I'm going to get before I read the book. Proven strategies for publishing, promoting, and profiting. Really simple. So if there's a whole life story on the front, again, I might do it. So I'm going to just steal a little tiny bit more of your time. And the last
Oh,
thing
I
to
love
say
this.
here is when I get inside the book. So I'm really not somebody who just glances through books usually. So once you've got me, you've got me, and I'm loyal to you. And I'm going to read, I go through all of the chapters. And I do get really tempted to jump and find, I want to skip ahead and look at something that's really specific. But most of the time, like specific to something that's happened to me in a time sensitive way in my life. But
Yeah.
most of the time, I'll go chapter by chapter. I am the biggest nerd reader you could imagine. I'll highlight as I go. I write in the margins. I'll put post-it notes in there with homework for myself. And my job is to be your A student, even if I've never met you, the author. And that's how I read your book. So there's a lot of different readers out there, but the cover has to grab me. The
Yeah.
marketing. So I can't tell you how many people have come to me and asked me to provide the kinds of services that you provide, not realizing that a hybrid company such as yourself provides that. And
Yeah.
but it's those things that make me want to read them or not read them. Those things like I don't know how to do my cover. I don't know how to, they have the content and they have the idea, they want to write it, but everything that has to do with them, the basic publishing part with the
The detail.
marketing and the layout, I've yet to meet authors that had it, especially first time authors who had it all figured out and was just like, yeah, here, David, I've got it. I mean, I packed your lunch for you. Like you don't have to do anything. So you're so needed. And I did want to ask you though, without jumping into all the spoiler alert of the book,
Yeah.
I was just telling you some of the things that I feel like that how I look at it as a reader or how I look at it as an expert. But what do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that authors make?
Oh, that's an
Jump
easy
right into
question.
that. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm grateful for you going through the book because all those things are very intentional and they all mean stuff. And some of it might be very subtle, where you don't even realize that experience. So since the bulk of our books are sold from brick and mortar stores today,
Yep.
that experience of holding, touching, it's got to look as good or gooder, I say, than the books to the left and the right of it. But they're also that experience of, it's emotion from the cover, the title, subtitle leading them to the back cover leading them to the table of contents. And if they start skimming, like you said, that's when you really got them. That's when they're headed to the cash register.
Yep.
But the mistakes that most authors use are seemingly subtle and they may not think it's important until it is. Probably the biggest mistake is, the best time to start marketing your book is the moment you decide to write it, not 2 weeks before pub date.
Thank you, David. Thank you.
Yeah. And then the other thing is a lot of authors feel like their first or second draft is the one. It's it. But the reality is, really good manuscript, the best authors, we go through them many times. We bring in beta readers. We accept feedback. That's the hardest thing for us to do, as authors, as creators, but you've really got to make sure it's that third, fourth, or fifth, or seventh draft. That's the right one. You have to eventually stop, but you do need to be intentional that you've got to read it out loud because you'll find things you never would miss, you never would be able to catch, and you'll miss if you don't read it out loud. But those are the two mistakes. And then the third mistake, if I can add, and there's a bunch. The third one would be is we tend to give up too soon. People forget that a lay person needs to hear about you 7 times before they even think they've heard of you before. And this is classic guerrilla marketing, but they need to see you 27 times before they're ready to think, I might be ready to buy that book. But most authors, and I could certainly be guilty of it too, but most people, they'll market the book, then they'll get discouraged because they sent 3 emails and only sold no books. and uh,
Right.
and then they'll like their spouses might be saying, "Oh my gosh, you're talking about this forever," and I think it's about time to stop because nobody's buying your book. Have you ever read Acres of Diamonds or 3 Feet from Gold or heard those stories? It's the messages of where people stop right before they hit
Oh,
the gold or whatnot.
okay.
Same thing in life, same thing in business, same thing with authorship. A
Yeah.
lot of authors will get to that point where they think they're saying it too much, they're not seeing the results, and they walk away, but not understanding that next email was the one, that next podcast interview was the one that's going to break open that 27th time that audience is starting to hear you. And that's where the real magic happens. Very rarely do we have an author that pops right out of the gate, as a best-selling author. Some of our most successful authors that have gone on to sell hundreds of thousands of books was a nice steady rise. So
Yeah.
we forget that. So those are my top 3 mistakes that I always encourage authors to not do.
Yeah, I love that for sure. And I think that a lot of authors get discouraged when they're not instant influencers on their first book. And you're a serial entrepreneur and you've written how many books?
That one is my 26th book.
26th book right here. And it's butter. It feels like butter. Yeah. So I can't wait to do my read. I'm going to definitely jump into it on our next call since asked you in front of everyone. Right. So, but I do
Absolutely.
want to, oh, thank you, David. You're always so gracious. So, well, let me ask you this. Okay. So here's one of the things that I think that a lot of authors underestimate, and I really want your perspective on this. So, being somebody that works with publicity and brand, I'm always so excited when I have an expert, somebody, especially we work a lot with wellness, wealth and wisdom, right? And they think, "Oh, who am I to write this book?"
Right?
And then let's say they actually got as far as writing the book. I am sometimes shocked how I have these very humble and very sometimes introverted, and I just want to focus on honing my craft and serving others. And they don't want to promote the book, or they don't think they need to promote the book, or they think
Oh
that
gosh.
it's somehow off-putting if they promote the book or make money. And this hurts my little Babylon heart. Yeah, so I would love to team up with you on this particular subject because the credibility that you have by being an author and having so much of your words out there in this physical and digital, presentation of yourself, when we are in a full-time AI, gold rush here, um, it's I'll be scrolling like this on the AI that I'm looking at on my phone, but when I read a book, I'm not going. Like this, I'm trying to mimic the phone.
Right?
I'm not. I have like over I don't know 1,000 books on my shelf over here, and I'm not just when I pick one up, I don't just throw them behind me like this. Like once I touch one and commit to it, I'm doing some deep reading in there.
That's right.
So can you please talk to me about the influence that comes with the book, the a very specific type of influence. and it's about credibility and about authenticity. Credibility and authenticity. Yes, we want to make money too, but all right, there I set the stage. Go for it, David.
I hear it a lot, where people think, I've written the book, I've done my job. But the reality is certainly we've written books for a reason. We've written books to change lives, to teach our wisdom, to pass on the things that we've learned so you can avoid the mistakes that we've made. In fact, our mantra here at Morgan James is we publish books that educate, encourage, inspire, and entertain. But if nobody knows it's out there, you're not going to do any of that. So sure, it may be the best book on the planet. You may have the best wisdom and insight. You may be the best looking author, whatever. But if nobody knows it's out there, nothing's going to happen. And in today's environment, readers, consumers, are different. 10 years ago, as you well know, Starley, people were writing books. We were writing books, and nobody could care less who we were as authors. Now, that's just what we deal with, and that was fine. We have to give good content. We still have to get people to discover the book. But today, blame it on a number of things. I don't care what you blame it on. I think it's a good thing. People want connection just as much as they want content. And if they don't feel that connection with you, if they don't feel like you're authentic, if they don't feel like they get to know you or relate to you, and trust me, they want to see you playing with the grandkids or driving the Defender on the beach just as much as they want to see your content because they really want to get to know who you are. Without that, they'll buy a lesser book or they won't buy yours at all.
Yes.
And those authors that think, I don't need to market it because the content is so sound, they're just missing the opportunity to change lives. And in reality, most of us write books to change one life. If one life has changed, one situation has improved, one goal met because of something they learned from us, man, our hearts are full because we use the books for more than just book sales. We use the books to grow authenticity, credibility, opportunity, and reach through other things like speaking or other engagements or other products or other books. I'm always teaching authors, you need to always be thinking 2 products ahead. And without an audience who wants to buy it, no matter how humble you think you're trying to be, is not going to
Yeah,
happen.
I so agree. And the authors that I know that they so much want to make a difference in other people's lives, and being more well known is part of how you do that. I mean, you wouldn't, you know, go and write your books and pour your heart into them and spend all these months or even longer and then take them all and go into a dark room and close the curtains and the doors and turn the lights off and sit there silently.
Yeah.
And I know that's an extreme, example, but that's what it looks like to me when authors are not feeling comfortable to promote themselves. And I think there's so many ways that you teach. And there's, for me, when I help people with their camera confidence, there's so many ways that you can feel comfortable either in front of a webcam or a stage or a video camera or your selfie or whatever it is, or book readings, because once you start to really talk, about your message,
Yeah.
you're in your zone and you don't have to worry about being a performer because you're not performing. You are sharing the stories that mean something to you. And
Yeah.
anyway, I that's just such a big one for me. You could tell, like, just, oh, I get frustrated because I think that one, that their stories need to be seen and in the hands, in front of the eyes of so many. And I think too, it breaks my heart where they think that they shouldn't do it because it's a very, counterintuitive thing. But all right,
Here's the secret.
yes, yes,
It's not about selling books. So authors that try to sell books fail miserably. They get discouraged so fast. It's
yes,
not about selling books. It's about the message. It's about the power and passion of why you wrote the book in the first place and the connection that you're trying to create. Then it becomes a whole lot easier to sell books. So like for what we look at Morgan James, 80% is the author. Who are they? What are they doing? And why? Very important. The book itself, 20%. You could always hire a better editor. Heck, you can delete it and start over with a new ghostwriter if you want to, but you can't fix an author that doesn't care. That's kind of the way we look at it.
yeah,
But authors that are trying to say, hey, go buy my book, hey, go buy my book, hey, go buy my book are really struggling. It's how can I serve them? How can I educate them? How can I encourage, inspire them and get connected to you and just share wisdom and become accessible to them? And then they can't help want to buy the book. They're like, when and where and how can I buy this book? Because they really feel like you've got the solutions for them. And again, we are a solutions driven thinking publishing house. And we definitely like books that have solutions, but they just need to learn about the solution. How is it connected to the bigger picture? What is it supporting? Is it supporting a small entrepreneurial venture, a big business, small business, or a nonprofit or a faith message? How is the book connected, and lean into that? And then selling books is not only fun, but a lot easier.
Yeah, I love that. That reminds me of how I tell people to lean into the lens with love when they have fear. Like, because love, you can't have love and fear at the same time. But
Right.
so I love how you say that. And so in wrapping up, I wanted to say that I believe in what you're teaching so much. That's why we have that retreat is literally called the credibility and visibility retreat. So what's happened is you have people that have immense credibility who don't have your kind of visibility. And so that's why it would hurt my heart to think that they, wouldn't double down on that visibility because that's how they get their message out to other people. So
That's right.
I'm so grateful for what you have done for so many of the authors and that I have met and that talk about you and only have the best things to say. I've been to your events behind the scenes, and people love you, your family, the team. And I'm really grateful that you took care of our attendees. And so they have in their gift bag, and our members of the media, they're all going to get this. And I'm doing my homework before the event and do my reading. And so at our next meeting, I want to double down, and I want to pull through some of the ones that some of our communities have had the biggest struggles with. And then I'll be like how remember you said you were whining a little today at one point, like I just, I'm probably gonna do that. I'm gonna be like, David, mentor David. Ugh. And so I can't wait. I'm gonna do a thorough, good read through, but I'm really grateful. And
I'm honored.
yeah, thank you so much. And so I just wanted to close out and say that I get a really great opportunity to speak with and meet people over the last 3 decades that are ultra successful, ultra famous, and the crumbs that fall off the shoulders of these giants have been parts of the lucky mentoring, the little, nuggets that I've been receiving over the years. And David's been one of the most generous people. And, not only that, but, the nonprofit that you are, one of the founders of, and the fact that you do so much to give back to the community. And then you're just a superhero dad and husband too. So I'm just going to put you on the spot. I won't be
Oh my gosh.
satisfied wrapping up, like this until I know you start to turn a little red. So,
Well, I
all right,
appreciate
David.
that.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much. And of course, we've got, all of the important information that's, going to be in the description. And you know me, a lot of times I like to put up my little fancy bullets and graphics. So that's all people will have already seen this part. But thank you,
Excellent.
David, so much. And I look forward to the next time.
Starley, thank you. I appreciate you. And I look forward to the next time as well.
All right. Well, that's a wrap.